Napoleon's brother, Prince Jerome Bonaparte, is in command of the 6th Infantry Division, which launches the first French attack of the day, against Hougoumont, the important strategic outpost on Wellington's right flank, that is defended by a composite force of British, Nassau and Hanoverian infantry companies. General Baudouin leads the 1st Brigade of the division, in a swift assault, along the western side of the chateau, and catches the surprised defenders off guard. A desperate hand-to-hand combat ensues at the north main gate, during which General Baudouin is mortally wounded. The bold French attackers are confronted and scattered by the fierce counter-attack of the 2nd Coldstream Foot Guards Battalion, which has been sent in by Wellington, who supervises the tense situation, from the main position, north of Hougoumont. After the first French assault fails, Jerome launches the remainder of his division to capture both the woods and the walled garden of Hougoumont, while his superior, the 2nd Corps commander, Count Triel, has ordered forward the 9th Infantry Division to simultaneously seize the great orchard next to the chateau's garden. From his main position, the Duke of Wellington observes the French attack and is directing Major Boule's British battery of howitzers to drop shell bursts over the heads of the French attackers as they advance across the open fields and into the woods. Despite the overhead explosions and the resulting bursting showers of deadly tree splinters causing numerous casualties in their ranks, the French bravely press forward. The French attackers drive back the outnumbered Nassau and Hanoverian skirmishers facing them, who are blending amid the trees. But the assault is brought to an abrupt halt by the devastating firepower of the British foot guards, who man the parapets and loopholes of the walled garden. Despite receiving a similar fusillade of bullets from the Nassau troops occupying the Great Orchard, the French soldiers of General Chamoun's brigade, of the 9th Infantry Division, has better luck as they succeed in their mission to fight their way into the orchard and seize it. In the woods, while attempting to urge his own troops forward, Jerome receives a severe bullet wound and must leave the battlefield. The British 3rd Foot Guards Battalion, which was urgently sent from the main position, arrived to assist the Nassau defenders, who have been driven back into the sunken laneway north of the orchard. Meanwhile, in the French centre, Napoleon's orders to assemble his grand battery of 80 guns has been completed by 1 o'clock. During the fierce action raging all around Hougoumont, the chateau's garrison of the Coldstream Guards beats back a French storming party's break-in attempt through the west wall's side entrance. Wellington can see that the French capture of the Great Orchard threatens to outflank the hard-pressed defense of the walled garden and the chateau garrison. He quickly summons General Duplat's King's German Legion Infantry Brigade to join the frantic fighting at Hougoumont. Desperation mounts as the defenders' numbers are weakening by the minute in the walled garden position. Worse comes when unexpectedly, the British 3rd Foot Guards have been pushed back from the orchard laneway, where the French now commence a breakout. The besieged Allied defenders seem to be on the verge of being overwhelmed. French pressure finally succeeds with a penetration into the walled garden from the rear, scattering back the Nassau troops confronting them. The intrepid French infantry have now surrounded the remaining British defenders at the garden wall parapets, and are also attempting to burst through the chateau's east side's garden gateway. Hougoumont defense is at the point of collapse. But the tables suddenly turn against the French during the chaotic close combat, when General Chamoun suddenly goes missing without a trace. And while the dwindling British and Nassau defenders stubbornly hold out at the chateau and garden wall, the 4 battalions of Duplat's KGL Brigade makes a timely arrival in force. At the same time, the British 3rd Foot Guards have rallied and launch a furious counter-attack that not only retakes the Great Orchard but also completely drives away the French from the garden area. Duplat's battalions occupy the orchard and the north main gate area. The French have had enough, and Count Triel orders his 2 battered divisions to fall back and consolidate their positions in the woods. By 3 o'clock, the first main French attack has cost heavy casualties among 2 of its elite infantry divisions, and lost 3 of their generals. French cannons are brought forward to start shelling the chateau. Napoleon's Grand Battery, consisting of 80 cannons, has set up in the French centre, and is in action during the fierce ongoing deadly contest at Hougoumont. Because of the stubborn defence at the chateau, Wellington has not been obliged to divert significant reserves away from his centre, towards that vulnerable hotspot. Despite this initial setback, Napoleon launches his planned main central attack, which will be supervised by his appointed overall frontline commander, the fearless Marshal Michel Ney, also known as the bravest of the brave. Under Ney's direction, the immense attack is to be carried out by the 1st French Infantry Corps of Count Drouet-d'Erlon, with the singular mission of capturing the Ohain Ridge, by crushing its protectors, the troops of Wellington's weak left flank, and then controlling the eastern side of the battlefield. The follow-up strategic objective is the capture of Mont Saint-Jean village, and thus split Wellington's line in two. And from there, nothing could stop the French from marching victoriously to the nearby Belgian capital, Brussels. The Allied army's left flank and centre endures the French cannonade with minimal damages suffered. This is thanks to Wellington's own use of his trademark grand tactic of keeping his troops protected and hidden from view by the clever use of reverse slope positioning behind the summits of Mont Saint-Jean Hill and the Ohain Ridge. These domineering hill crests allows the Allied army to remain mostly invisible to the French artillery crews on the opposite side of the valley. For this reason, the French gunners are unable to use destructive, direct sight cannon fire, as they did, with deadly effect, against the Prussian army which had deployed on the forward slopes, at the bloody Battle of Ligny, fought 2 days earlier. However, the skilled French gunners are the best in the world, and most of their cannonade involves an expertise of indirect area firing, lobbing their shots against unseen enemy targets. Slowly and steadily, the French barrage inflicts mounting losses upon Wellington's troops and guns. During the barrage, a sensational incident occurs in the Allied centre, when one entire Hanoverian cavalry regiment, the Cumberland Hussars, decides to turn around and exit the battlefield completely. After 1 hour of the preparatory barrage, Ney and d'Erlon start the opening movements of their great attack at 2:30 p.m. The entire attack force numbers 16,000 infantry, and a supporting brigade of heavy cavalry cuirassiers. Napoleon also gave orders to Count Lobau to move his weak 6th Corps and follow 2 French light cavalry divisions to the eastern edge of the battlefield. Although the 6th Corps commander is told he is deployed to support the great attack, the true ominous reason is the sudden confirmed news that Napoleon has just learned. The Prussian army can be seen marching towards the battlefield, and is only a few hours away. Wellington is relieved to see Field Marshal Blucher fulfilling his promise to bring his Prussian army to the battle, despite being chased by the 33,000 French troops of Marshal Grouchy's command, now heading to the town of Wavre, many miles away. Unfortunately for Wellington, the Prussians have not arrived as early as had anticipated, to join and reinforce his weak left flank. As a result, it is here, the mixed force of British, Dutch, Belgian, Hanoverians, Nassau's, and Germans, are alone and outnumbered by almost 2-to-1 odds when they face the brunt of the French great attack. These troops were involved in the Battle of Quatre Bras, just 2 days earlier, where many battalions suffered significant losses, particularly among General Picton's veteran Highland 5th Division, and General Perponcher's heroic 2nd Netherlands Division. The French Grand Battery temporarily ceases its barrage, as Count d'Erlon's infantry columns passes through the gun positions, before descending into the valley below the intermediate ridge. The attack proceeds with difficulty, slowed down by tall crops and muddy fields, while taking losses from enemy cannonballs and canister blasts. Nevertheless, before long, the entire length of the battlefield's east side is immersed with blazing musket fire and close combat clashes, when all of the French assaults simultaneously strike their main objectives, along the crest of the Ohain Ridge. The French make immediate progress on the eastern edge of the battlefield, where General Duret's 4th Division captures 3 of the 4 outposts defended by General Saxe-Weimar's Nassau Brigade. The French 1st Division of General Quiot attacks Wellington's centre. One of its brigades quickly surrounds the strategic strong point in front of Wellington's centre, the farmhouse of La Haye-Saint. Its defenders, a German battalion of riflemen, commanded by Major Bering, are in need of reinforcements, but the 2 German brigades in direct support are forced to form squares when they are charged by the French cavalry brigade of General Dubois' 800 cuirassiers. One Hanoverian square is broken and overrun. Several French battalions of Quiot's other brigade boldly marches up the highway towards the crossroads, but they are brought to a halt by salvos of scaling canister blasts fired by the Allied batteries defending the position. In addition, the columns are shot up by the accurate sniping of the British detachments of the 95th Rifles that occupy the knoll and sandpit just south of the crossroads. The French infantry columns of General Donzelot's 2nd Division and General Marquignot's 3rd Division ascend the central slope of the Ohain Ridge. Both divisions are moving in huge phalanxes, each comprised of 8 battalions. When they reach the crest of the ridge, the French engage in a vicious firefight against the outnumbered battalions of General Biland's Dutch Belgian Brigade. Biland's hard-pressed battalions make a determined stand, but are soon overwhelmed and forced to fall back in complete disarray, yielding their protected position behind the hedge-lined Ohain sunken road to the victorious French. General Picton's 2 Highland brigades, deployed in support on both flanks of Biland's brigade, are moved up too late to assist the shattered Dutch Belgians, who are attempting now to reform around their nearby reserve battalion. General Pack's 9th Highland Brigade counterattacks the column of the French 3rd Division that has just occupied the eastern half of Ohain Ridge. Heavy musketry duels rage between the two sides. The French advantage in numbers and higher ground inflicts heavy losses among Pack's Highland battalions, whereupon the surviving remnants are obliged to begin falling back. At the same time, General Kempt's 6th Highland Brigade has better luck in their own counterattack, launched along the western half of the Ohain Ridge. They confront and drive back General Donzelot's battalions from the crest line. The kilted battalion of the 79th Highlanders brazenly charges over the ridge, and down to the valley as they chase away the beaten French infantry, all while their bagpiper, Mackay, is on the knoll, calmly playing the stirring tune of Pied Rock, War or Peace. By 3:30 p.m., the French great attack is on the verge of possibly capturing the entire Ohain Ridge. Responding to this critical threat, Wellington's troops in the area make a strong counter-attack against the French advance. The Allied Army's cavalry commander, the Earl of Uxbridge, who has been watching the tense events unfold, finally gives the signal for his 2 waiting elite British heavy cavalry brigades to charge into battle. To the west of the Brussels Highway, the Household Cavalry Brigade countercharges and scatters the French cuirassiers of General Dubois. The British Dragoons continue thundering down the slopes to the La Haye Saint farmhouse, where they then repulse a battalion of French infantry which is assaulting the barricaded barn door entrance. On the east side of the Brussels Highway, the 3 British heavy dragoon regiments of the Union Brigade burst forward against the victorious French battalions that are deploying across the Ohain sunken road. The 2nd Scots Grace Dragoons charge General Marquignot's battalions, hacking one to pieces. But the Greys are rebuffed by a French infantry square that has formed quickly on the high ground. To their right, the 6th Inniskillings Dragoons cut a swathe of destruction through General Donzelot's unprepared battalions. The Inniskillings spur their horses across the sunken road and slash their way through the ranks of the shocked French infantry as they flee to their own side of the valley. The regiment of battle-crazy British Dragoons even reach the east end of the French Grand Battery, where groups of French infantry bravely fight back against the chopping British sabres. Posted behind Kempt's brigade, the 1st Royals Dragoons initiate their own attack with similar bravado. The British horsemen plough through 2 of Donzelot's battalions. The 79th Highland Infantry Battalion, which has advanced into the valley, cheer on the Royals as they speed by, heading towards the French Grand Battery. However, the success is short-lived. Only moments later, the valiant British troopers are decimated by salvos of close-range canister firing from a French horse battery that had unlimbered in the valley. Marshal Ney and Count d'Erlon both spectate the British cavalry counter-attack with some alarm. But the volatile situation reverses once again in favor of the French. General Jacquinot has made a sudden appearance in the moment of crisis. He personally leads the 3rd French Lancers from his light cavalry division in a bold flanking charge, speedily covering the 1,000 yards distance from the French right flank before colliding into the backs of the stunned British Inniskillings Dragoons during the frantic melee beside the Grand Battery. At 3:45 p.m., French cheers and roars of victory erupt around the Brussels Highway. The French have captured the La Haye Saint farmhouse. The German defenders had been without support for too long. Major Bering escapes back to the main position with 100 of his surviving riflemen. although half of Picton's division still holds the western half of the Ohain Ridge, and the approaches to the central crossroad, alongside General Ompted's KGL Infantry Brigade, their hold is now tenuous. The French infantry of General Marcognet are consolidating their hold on the eastern side of the Ohain Ridge, and they beat the counterattack of General Best's Hanoverian Infantry Brigade. The German infantry try to support Pack's retreating Highlanders, but the sticky clay slopes in this sector assist the French battalions in decimating and repelling their bogged-down attack. The remnants of Bylandt's Dutch-Belgian brigade make a defiant stand in the valley, north of the Ohain Ridge, giving time for a new Allied defensive line to form alongside them. General Lambert's strong British infantry brigade had only arrived on the battlefield hours earlier, and were stationed as reserves at the village of Mont Saint-Jean. Wellington orders Lambert to immediately advance his brigade and join Bylandt's last stand, with the task to plug the gap in that sector of the Allied line. At 4 p.m., Lambert presses forward, determined to retake the eastern half of the Ohain Ridge, where Marcognet's French battalions stand their ground along the crest, and are getting ready to welcome the oncoming 2,400 British redcoats with deadly volleys. Meanwhile, from the summit of Mont Saint-Jean Hill, General Keelman Sedge leads his Hanoverian Infantry Brigade in a massive attack to try and retake the farmhouse of La Haye Sainte. The bold move is in vain, since the French have poured significant reinforcements into the important strong point. The Germans make an orderly retreat back to the hilltop. Suddenly, all fighting in the area is suspended momentarily, when, from its position at the crossroads, the KGL battery of Captain Cleves scores a direct hit on the French Grand Battery across the valley. One of its shots ignites a French ammunition wagon, and the ensuing devastating loud explosions wipe out 6 French cannons and their crews. But, just minutes later, fate turns against Captain Cleves' gunners, when they are massacred by yet another swift flanking strike of the French 3rd Lancers, led by General Jacquinot. The Lancers' luck runs out when they in turn are decimated by the volleys of Ompted's KGL squares, holding the nearby crossroads. At this time, a continuous loud thundering can be heard in the area. Marshal Ney is stunned and thrilled at the sight of General Milhaud's entire 4th Cavalry Corps of 3,000 cuirassiers, galloping toward the Ohain Ridge. Napoleon has sent this reserve of heavy cavalry to exploit the success of Marcognet's division. The French 8 regiments of steel breastplated troopers surge north of the Ohain Ridge, where their advance is halted upon confronting Lambert's battalions, which have quickly formed squares. Several cuirassier regiments veering to the east of the British squares succeed in further blunting the Allied counter-attack. One regiment surmounts the high mound on the eastern end of the Ohain Ridge, where with several French infantry squares, they deter further advance of General Vandeleurs' British Light Cavalry Brigade that has just arrived on the scene. The 10th Cuirassiers Regiment probes further north. They race by Bylandt's emaciated brigade that has formed a single square, and then from an ambush position, while hidden among the valley folds of ground, the French troopers rapidly charge upon the surprised Netherlands cavalry brigades of General Colert, which had been rushed from the reserve positions, in an uncoordinated movement. The Dutch-Belgian horsemen fall back to regroup, leaving the French 10th Cuirassiers to run rampant in the area, as they overwhelm a stranded Dutch horse battery. By 4:30 p.m., the cannonade of the French Grand Battery noticeably intensifies. Amid the storm of French cannonballs falling on the hill of Mont Saint-Jean, Wellington is alongside Uxbridge, as they together survey the worsening situation on the Allied army's left flank. The Duke turns to his cavalry commander, and whispers, "It appears, Uxbridge, that we may be losing this battle." In anticipation of having to make ready for a general withdrawal from the battle, Wellington sends out several messengers. They carry orders to fortify the village of Mont Saint-Jean, and prepare a rearguard to defend it, and to alert the Belgian coastal ports to be ready to re-embark the British army. At that moment, the Duke receives an unexpected visitor, riding up at a gallop, with urgent news. The officer is his Prussian liaison, Baron von Muffling. His wide-eyed face is flushed with excitement, as he announces, and points emphatically to the eastern horizon, "Sire, the here. The here. Blucher is here. Die Prussian army is here." Marshal Blucher's Prussian army is finally in action on the eastern edge of the battlefield. Keeping his promise to the Duke of Wellington, Blucher and his determined staff are bringing 3 Prussian corps into battle. Over 50,000 Prussian soldiers and more than 80 of their cannons have been on the move since dawn, marching along miles and miles of roads that are very muddy, and also clambering across the slippery slopes of flooded ravines. The Prussian battle strategy is to destroy the French right flank and cut off Napoleon's line of retreat, while at the same time directly reinforcing Wellington's battered position. To counter this threat, the French 6th Corps of Count Lobau and the 2 attached light cavalry divisions are deployed in a stretched line, half a mile to the west of the Paris woods, from where thousands of Prussian soldiers pour out at 4:30 p.m. At 5 p.m., the French army suffers another great loss when General Duret of the 4th Infantry Division is mortally wounded, while personally leading one of his battalions in an unsuccessful bayonet attack against a Hanoverian battery position to the east of the Ohain Ridge. Word of his death does not deter his troops, who are now more determined to defend their hard-fought gains around the Smohain stream. Their morale is boosted when they see behind them the 2,000 colorful uniformed cavalrymen of the Light Cavalry Division of the Imperial Guard, led by General Lefebvre Desnetz, galloping towards the Ohain Ridge. Napoleon has sent this valuable cavalry reserve to help Marshal Ney take full control of the Ohain Ridge and the crossroads. To win the battle, the French must defeat Wellington before the Prussian army fully arrives in the field. If the French can capture the Mont Saint-Jean hill, Wellington will be forced to retreat. To achieve this success, Napoleon selects the fresh troops of General Baccalau's 5th Infantry Division, taken from Count Rialt's 2nd Corps. Count Kellermann's 3rd Heavy Cavalry Corps is summoned to make a diversionary attack ahead of the infantry assault. As a distraction, the 2nd Corps commander renews his attack against the Germans defending the Hougoumont orchard, and also successfully tasks his artillery howitzers to set fire to the chateau's buildings. Great clouds of black smoke now billow from Hougoumont, where the defending forces shrink by the minute. It is 5:15 in the evening when Marshal Ney takes command of the light cavalry of the Guard and personally leads the elite dashing horsemen in a headlong charge to vanquish Kempt's Highland Brigade from the western end of the Ohain Ridge. The Guard cavalry attack is cheered on by the French troops. The French lancers and chasseurs crash into the 4 British infantry battalions, and despite sustaining considerable losses, the spectacular charge is a complete success. Except for the defiant stand by the battalion of 95th Rifles on the crossroads, the rest of Kempt's brigade are thrown off the ridge entirely, and they are chased several hundreds of yards north on the Brussels highway. They managed to regroup, helped in part by the arrival of General Cruz's 3 Nassau contingent battalions, sent from the reserves by Wellington. During this devastating reversal for the Allied army, General Picton and General Kempt are both severely wounded. The French chasseurs of the Guard pursue the regrouping Highlanders, but are thrown back by the timely counter-attack of the British 2nd Life Guards, led by Lord Somerset, north of the crossroads. The Polish Lancer Squadron intervenes with their own charge, and scatters the Life Guards. A spirited charge by General Vandeleur's hussars throws back the French cuirassiers from the eastern end of the Ohain Ridge. The French bring up several horse batteries onto its crest. Lambert's brigade has held its position on the slope, but it has dwindled to the size of a battalion. The French bombardment increases its volume of deadly shots into Wellington's centre. Wellington's army is near its breaking point, and hundreds of demoralized Allied soldiers, of all nationalities, are finding their ways to exit the battle. The Duke fears the worst when he observes the French preparing to attack Mont Saint-Jean hill. The enemy pressure at the crossroads obliges Wellington to send the Brunswick contingent and General Merlin's Netherlands Light Cavalry Brigade to strengthen the centre. At the same time, General Chassey's 3rd Netherlands Infantry Division is shifted from its position on the Allied Army's right flank and closer to the Nivelles Highway. At Hougoumont, General Foy's battalions have broken into the Great Orchard. Once again, the Coldstream Guards and Nassau companies defending the Chateau and walled garden are under threat. Their numbers are down to a fraction of their original strength. The French snipers and artillery fire take a heavy toll on the garrison. The Brunswick avant-garde Jaeger Battalion is sent to relieve the Coldstream Guards. General Adams' powerful British Light Infantry Brigade also arrives into the front line after being called up from its reserve position. Their crucial role is to both support Maitland's Foot Guards Brigade and also prevent the besieged Hougoumont garrison from being cut off completely. Count Kelman's entire cavalry corps of 3,500 French dragoons and cuirassiers had been gathering in the valley east of Hougoumont, in preparation of charging Wellington's line along the western crest of Mont Saint John Hill. The British infantry brigades of Halkett, Maitland, and Adam have formed battalion squares to meet the impending French cavalry charges. Kellerman had led his surge of thousands of veteran horsemen forward. At the same time Marshal Ney led his charge of the Guard light cavalry at the crossroads. After braving artillery fire, while moving up the slopes, the French cavalry surround the British infantry squares. A series of Allied cavalry counterattacks, and the few batteries still in action, among them, Captain Mercer's G Troop, assist in successfully fending off the mounted French assailants by 5:30 p.m. The 1st Foot Guards, 2nd Battalion's square, is broken during the melee by the elite copper breastplated troopers of the 2nd Carabiniers. The British survivors are forced to retreat from the crest, creating a gap in the sector. The counterattacks of the Allied light cavalry brigades of Generals Grant and Dornberg block any further French advances. At 5:45 in the evening, the French have further success against the Allied centre, when Marshal Ney orders the chasseurs of the Guard to finish off the British riflemen still holding the east side of the crossroads. The chasseurs charge over the grisly ramparts of dead and wounded that surround the riflemen's position and succeed in utterly destroying the 95th Maroon 1st Battalion, along with their outposts on the knoll and in the sandpit. The Guard chasseurs brazenly venture further up the highway and annihilate Major Win Yates' British rocket battery. Only the volleys from nearby Nassau infantry squares force back the bold French intruders. General Baquelou's 9 infantry battalions ascend the slope of Mont Saint John, where they deploy on the summit and engage in fierce close combat action against the thinned infantry ranks of the Allied brigades of Halkett, Kielman-Sedge, and Umteda. The savage contest ends when the French infantry begin faltering, and then withdraw from the summit, heading back into the valley. Several of Kellerman's cavalry regiments still linger on the south slopes, waiting to launch opportunistic ambushes. Meanwhile, Baquelou's infantry battalions have been rallied. They prepare for a renewed assault on the summit. They will be spearheading a powerful second French attack force that is coming up the slope behind them. Napoleon's next major assault is composed of his Imperial Guard, namely, the entire Young Guard Infantry Division, led by General Duhem, and the 2,000 crack horsemen of General Guillau's Elite Guard Heavy Cavalry Division. Marshal Ney receives orders from Napoleon to fully support the upcoming new attack to capture Mont Saint John Hill. The Emperor's stern message emphasizes to the Marshal that the fate of France is in his hands. Napoleon envisions being in Brussels overnight if his ambitious Imperial Guard attack can finally drive Wellington's army away from Mont Saint John Hill. It is 6 o'clock in the evening. The French Grand Battery remains silent while fighting rages across Wellington's front line. The continuous sniping shots from the swarms of French skirmishers prowling across the whole front line further harasses Wellington's troops. On the Allied front positions, only a few of their artillery batteries are still operational. At Hougoumont, the Brunswick Jaegers of the Avant-Garde Battalion arrive and relieve the exhausted Coldstream Guards. Seeing these new enemy reinforcements, General Foy's exhausted French infantry retreat from the Great Orchard. Not long after their first foiled attempt, General Baquelou's battalions have rallied and once again march up the slope. 2 of Kellerman's dragoon regiments that have been prowling along the Mont Saint John summit launch opportunity attacks against the Allied line. General Guiton, leads the 7th Dragoons Regiment against the British 69th Infantry Regiment, as it tries to form a square. The attempt is too late, and the French cavalry attack, massacres them. The charge continues over the hill, where it is blocked, and badly shot up, by the oncoming, solid squares of General Ditmer's, Dutch-Belgian Infantry Brigade. The nearby Allied Light Cavalry Brigade of General Dornberg launches a counter-attack. The 1st KGL Light Dragoons throws back the French horsemen, and during the clash, General Guiton is severely wounded. General Piquet takes command of the 2nd Dragoons, and leads it in a charge against Humpty's KGL Brigade at the crossroads. The unprepared 5th KGL Infantry Battalion is scattered by the French Dragoons. However, other German infantry battalions in the vicinity catch the French cavalry in a deadly crossfire that wipes them out. General Piquet is critically wounded, and taken prisoner. During this chaotic cavalry action, General Baclou's infantry columns appear on the crest line. Dornberg's 23rd Light Dragoons charge a French battalion that has formed a square, but is beaten back. Wellington has appeared in the area and tries to rally the dragoons. It is here that a huge gap, several hundred yards wide, has split the Allied line. At the crossroads, the remnants of General Humpty's King's German Legion Brigade are hard hit by the French infantry columns. Behind them, the Earl of Uxbridge is at the head of the few squadrons left in his household brigade. The Germans withstand the assault, and force the enemy to retreat. Remaining steadfast, in the cover of the shot-up hedges along the Ohain Road, the Prince of Orange encourages General Kielman's Ages, battered Hanoverian Brigade, to hold their position on the summit. They obey, and succeed in finally obliterating the brave attack of Baclou's assault columns in their sector. Wellington's line has barely survived the past 30 minutes of turmoil. Yet, an even bigger threat approaches. Lively French drumbeats and bugle calls echo across the valley below. Napoleon's Imperial Guards are coming into the action. But, so too are the Prussians. In the ongoing action, on the extreme French right flank, General Buller's Prussian 4th Corps has finally forced Count Lobor's French 6th Corps to begin falling back. The troops of General Perchet's Prussian 2nd Corps are coming up behind Buller, stretched along the road from the Paris woods to the town of Lasny. Moving along the Prussian army's northern route to the battlefield are the advance guard of the Prussian 1st Corps. They had arrived at the town of Ohain, 2 miles northwest of the battlefield, just after 6 p.m. Fortunately for Wellington, at that time, his Prussian liaison, General Merfeling, had intercepted the Prussian 1st Corps commander, General Zieten, who was acting on orders to move his troops south, to join Bulow's 4th Corps. Merfeling barely managed to convince Zieten to instead rush the 1st Corps to join up directly with Wellington's battered front line, to prevent a looming catastrophe. As such, the Prussians are now on the way to link up with Wellington. But Napoleon's Imperial Guard attack is on the verge of crashing into Wellington's slowly crumbling center. In spite of the reports that the Prussians are approaching to the east of the Ohain Ridge, Marshal Ney's infantry and 18 guns on the high ground remain too strong to be threatened by the probing attack of Nassau infantry battalions that are emerging from the badly disrupted Allied center. At 6:30 in the evening, the Imperial Guard attack surges onto the crest of Mont Saint-Jean. The Young Guard Infantry Division sweeps forward, past Baclou's retreating battalions. The French advance branches into 3 assaults. General Duhem leads a strong attack, with the 4 guard battalions of voltigeurs, against the stubborn remnants of General Mtda's KGL brigade that is still defiantly defending the crossroads. The Germans put up a brave fight, but are forced to retreat. The French 3rd Voltigeurs Regiment's soldiers cry out, "Long live the Emperor," as they promptly form a square around a big elm tree, located on the elevated southwest corner of the crossroads. Another French assault column, composed of the 4 guard battalions of tirailleurs, strike the summit of Mont Saint-Jean Hill, where they crash headlong into the 3 remaining battered Hanoverian battalions. The defenders' commander, General Kielmansegge, is badly wounded during the frantic action. To the west of the tirailleurs column, the magnificent Imperial Guard cavalry regiments of General Guillau's Horse Grenadiers and Empress Dragoons launch a furious charge over the summit towards the gap in the Allied line. Colonel Hofmeyer leads the Empress Dragoons in a devastating attack that not only overwhelms and routs 2 of Halkett's last battalions on the summit, but also drives away a countercharge made by Dornberg's light dragoons. The unbeatable French dragoons turn away another counterattack launched by General Grant's light cavalry brigade. The victorious French Guard cavalry attack has dangerously widened the gap in the Allied line. The Duke of Wellington races to the spot to try and reverse the worsening situation, where large mobs of Allied soldiers are gathering in confusion. North of the crossroads, Uxbridge calls up the fresh troops of the Brunswick Corps to drive back the French Young Guard. The Brunswick Horse Battery unlimers in support, and blasts a French Voltigeur battalion back from the crest. Moving up on the highway, in support of the Brunswickers, General Merlin orders his Dutch-Belgian light cavalry brigade to charge the crossroads. There, the Young Guard infantry square firmly repels the attack. Marshal Ney immediately launches the Polish Lancers squadron in close pursuit. Their remarkable charge overruns a Nassau battalion and the KGL 1st Light Battalion that had just been ousted from the crossroads. The heroic Lancers then plunge further, deep into the enemy lines, where they end up viciously fighting for their own survival. This action marks Napoleon's furthest advance against Wellington. Half a mile to the north, at the village of Mont Saint-Jean, the powerful Prussian cavalry brigade of General Tresckow, racing ahead of General Ziethen's 1st Corps, has just arrived. Near the Allied Gap, at the west end of Mont Saint-Jean Hill, a lone French infantry battalion attacks Captain Mercer's battery in its flank, and forces the British gunners to retreat into the square of Maitland's Foot Guards. Covering the attack from the summit nearby, stand the French Guards Horse Grenadiers and 2 batteries. Ahead of them, the glorious charge of the Empress Dragoons is short-lived. Upon advancing down the reverse slope towards the gap, they run into the enemy's infantry squares of Halkett's rallying battalions, and the oncoming, strong Dutch-Belgian infantry brigade of General Detmers. The Empress Dragoons turn about, and attack towards the nearby left flank of General Kielmansege's Hanoverians. The surprise flanking attack of the French Dragoons crashes into the Hanoverian brigade, and overruns the square of the Lundberg battalion. The Dragoons then charge the neighboring Bremen battalion square, in which the young Prince of Orange has taken refuge. Although the Dragoons break into the square, the Prince encourages the Hanoverians to fight back, and repeatedly shouts out, "Bravo!" A strong column of Brunswick infantry, coming up the slope, forces the French Dragoons to fall back. The Bremen battalion's survivors loudly cheer, when the Prince proudly throws one of his own medals among them. Nevertheless, the isolated remnants of the Hanoverian brigade are being pulverized by the French assault of the Guard tirailleurs along the crest. A further attack made by the Brunswick Lancers against the French Guards square at the crossroads is completely destroyed by the defenders' deadly volley blasts. The French Imperial Guards are on the verge of capturing the entire Mont Saint-Jean hilltop. Marshal Ney is elated with the success of the Guard, and then even boldly dares to send a message to Napoleon to ask for more troops from the reserves to finish Wellington off. Just then, Ney's aide-de-camp, Colonel Haymes, redirects the Marshal's attention to a dramatic event that has been unfolding behind him. In stunned silence, Ney watches the entire French Grand Battery limbering their guns, and moving back towards the rear. With his telescope, he also sees the divisions of the Old Guard and Middle Guard begin moving to the east. He spots the entire French 6th Corps streaming back towards the village of Plancenoit. They are being chased back by tens of thousands of Prussian troops. Napoleon is changing his strategy. He is redeploying his right flank to win a defensive fight against the surge of arriving Prussians. Ney's strategic task is switched to holding back Wellington. The Corsican adventurer has opted to gamble on possibly fighting a two-day battle, if Marshal Grouchy's 33,000 troops can join him the next day. Marshal Ney is in a fury. He keeps himself busy by imploring all the nearby straggling French troops to advance to the front line. At 7 o'clock, all across the battlefront near the crossroads, the French soldiers are cheering. Without any scruples, Napoleon has sent his trusted staff officer, Count Lebedoyer, on a devious mission to announce false news that Marshal Grouchy and his troops have arrived in the battle on the east flank. Several French commanders, along with Ney, who are aware of the real situation, frown upon Napoleon's deception. One young guard battalion, advancing in support near the crossroads, charges across the summit, battering into the exhausted Bremen battalion, and wiping it out. The Prince of Orange is killed during this epic last stand of the brave Germans. The Polish lancers have extricated themselves from their melee, south of Mont St. John Farm, and race back to the Ohain Ridge. Guillot's Horse Grenadiers and Empress Dragoons begin to make an orderly retreat, upon seeing the new arrivals of Allied infantry reinforcements march onto the summit in strong squares. General Alten has scraped together enough rallied Hanoverians to form a battalion-sized square. Likewise, the survivors of Halkett's brigade does the same, and then reoccupies their former position on the crest. By 7:15 p.m., Marshal Ney sees that all the gains made by the Imperial Guard attack are quickly deteriorating. General Detmer's Dutch Belgians pause momentarily to lament the sight of their dead prince, whose body is being carried past them from the front line. The battalions in the rear put their shakos on their bayonets and roar battle cries in praise of their martyred prince. They surge forward, to the right of the 6 Brunswick infantry battalions that are robustly advancing to retake the crossroads. The black-uniformed Brunswick columns storm into a furious clash with the French Young Guard defenders, who, although managing to rout most of the Brunswick infantry, begin to give way. The German soldiers press onwards, intent on seeking to avenge the death of their duke, who was killed 2 days earlier at the Battle of Quatre-Bras. Their vengeance is achieved, as the French Young Guards infantry, and the Guard cavalry on their flanks, all slowly fall back before the Brunswick advance. The Brunswick horse battery rakes more destruction into the retreating French. Trescow's Prussian dragoons also joins the Allied advance, trotting along the highway behind the victorious Brunswickers, who have now retaken the crossroads. Ney's right flank completely collapses. Several Prussian infantry regiments and horse batteries rapidly push on to the eastern end of the Ohain Ridge. The French cannons quickly evacuate the crest, while the 45th Line Regiment forms 2 battalion squares to cover the French retreat. To their south, Duret's division is in full retreat, as both the Prussians and Saxe-Weimar's Nassau battalions push them back from the enclosures they had captured around the Smohain ravine. By 7:30 in the evening, with a spectacular, blood-red, setting sun as an ominous backdrop, only further doom seems to await Marshal Ney's collapsing position. The evening sun slowly descends, behind the western horizon of the blood-soaked battlefield. Wellington has successfully closed the gap in his line, and with great satisfaction, he watches the French retreat from Mont St. John Hill. He rides up onto the skyline, where he waves his hat high in the air, and gives the order for his army to make a general advance, and form a long line, along the entire ridge. General Vivian's Hussars Brigade chases the French beyond the Ohain crest, while the Prussian left flank follows close behind. In the French centre, General Barrois is in command of the square of the Young Guards, 1st Voltigeurs Regiment, as it undertakes an impressive fighting withdrawal, while stalked by the enemy. The square is firing and retiring, while falling back step by step, from the crossroads, then to the knoll, and finally standing firm at the sandpit, across from La Haye Saint Farm, as the evening sky begins to darken. Marshal Ney receives orders from Napoleon to stage a new front line in the valley, below Wellington's army, using the infantry divisions of the Young Guard and Waterloo, alongside the cavalry divisions of the Imperial Guard and Kellerman's corps, with the mission to hold their positions until nightfall. Ney is also informed by Napoleon of the new strategy, which involves the second battlefront being formed, to hold back the Prussian advance on the French right flank. The Marshal redeploys the depleted regiments of Derland's infantry and Melhaud's cavalry to the east of La Haye Saint Farm. To their south, Napoleon has repositioned the Grand Battery across the dominant heights around the Inn of La Belle Alliance, and facing the Prussian advance. The 80 French cannons have a wide clear field of fire, stretching across the valley before them. Half a mile to their southwest, Count Lebon has set up his 20th Division on a large hill, and his 19th Division has occupied the village of Plancenoit. The meager remains of his attached 2 light cavalry divisions are dispersed among the infantry positions. Napoleon parades on horseback, in front of his wildly cheering veterans of the Old Guard and the Middle Guard divisions. The Imperial Guard military bands play Chant du Départ, while their confident emperor leads his elite battalions to their new positions. Their mission is simple: crush the impending Prussian attack. The Middle Guard is deployed as a reserve behind the 20th Division's position on Plancenoit Hill. One of the Middle Guard regiments is posted on the hilltop, while another is sent to garrison the Church of St. Catherine, located in the center of the village of Plancenoit. The Old Guard battalions are assigned to protect the crucial highway area, in the French army's south, to hold back any Prussian advance along the Lasne ravine. The Prussian High Command have devised their plan to destroy Napoleon's army. Realizing that Wellington's army has inflicted heavy losses on the French army throughout the battle, Marshal Blucher and his staff have decided to use a 3-pronged assault against Napoleon's new battlefront facing them. General Perchet's Second Corps provides the central attack. Its ambitious mission is to capture the Plancenoit Hill and continue to the Brussels Highway to split Napoleon's army in two. Not all of the Second Corps units have arrived on the battlefield in time to join the attack, but there are enough troops available for the task. General Bulow's 4th Corps is divided into the north and south prongs of the assault. The north wing, supported by Zieten's 1st Corps Advance Guard Infantry of Steinmetz, is assigned to cross the open valley and head west to capture both the La Haye Saint Farm and also La Belle Alliance. Bulow's south wing is given the unenviable task of capturing the village of Plancenoit, and from there, break through to the highway to cut off Napoleon's line of retreat. Just after 8 o'clock, as the sun drops below the western horizon, the final episode of the epic battle begins, when the Prussian north wing advances. The Prussian squadrons of Prince William's cavalry brigade are joined by Vivian's hussars as they gallop forward, ahead of the Prussian infantry brigades of Generals Hake and Losthin, and accompanied by numerous batteries of artillery. The French Grand Battery belches forth a storm of cannonballs and exploding shells, with devastating effect among the Prussian ranks that are marching uphill and exposed in the open fields. The Prussian attack falters, and its commanders soon realize that any further advance against the French gun positions will result in catastrophic losses. The north wing attack is slowly pulled back. The central attack of Perchet's Second Corps confidently moves forward in packed attack columns, which successfully drive into Count Lochbau's defenses on the hilltop. General Junin's 20th Division makes a brave attempt to stand their ground, but slowly their batteries are overrun, and their battalions and cavalry support begin to fade away. The Prussian Second Corps have almost completed their success, until they are confronted on the summit by the square of the 1st Battalion of the 4th Chasseurs, and the last operating battery of the 6th Corps. The heavily outnumbered French defenders magnificently beat back the repeated Prussian infantry and cavalry attacks. Prussian casualties begin to mount so fast, General Perchet orders his battered corps to begin a hasty retreat. Operating to the south of the hill, General Zorn is having better success, while leading the Prussian 5th Hussars Regiment in a spectacular charge deep into the French positions, having routed 2 French cavalry regiments. Behind them, detachments of Perchet's infantry and artillery divert south to attack the north of Plancenoit. The Prussian south wing has also launched its main assault on the village. General Reissel throws his Prussian infantry brigade into the eastern outskirts, driving out the depleted French battalions of General Simmer's 19th Division. The Prussian diversionary move, south of the Lasne ravine, is blocked by General Souberville's French lancers, east of the Chantelet hamlet. As twilight becomes night, the blazing houses of Plancenoit provides a hellish backdrop, while the determined Prussian infantry engage in fierce street fighting against the French defenders, who are slowly falling back towards the village centre. Eventually, Reissel's exhausted battalions reach the church of St. Catherine. Savage close combat rages all around the church, and in its graveyard, as the French chasseur guards, led by General Michel, display a fanatic, successful defence of the position. Just before night falls, Napoleon orders all of his reserves of the Old Guard, and the Middle Guard, to push forward and drive back the Prussian attackers, and then form a line from north to south, to consolidate alongside the successful valiant defenders, on the hill summit, and at the village of Plancenoit. A dozen battalions of veteran French guards march forward into the darkness, loudly shouting, "Victory!" and "Long live the Emperor!" The entire line of the Prussian attack force is in full retreat, only stopping in safety, half a mile to the east. Night has fallen, when at 9:30 p.m., in the gloom of the full moonlight, the French reinforcements of General Cambronne's Middle Guard chasseurs complete their push forward to secure Plancenoit Hill, while General Moran's Old Guard battalions have fully secured the village. The dramatic day and night of battle has finally ended. Napoleon's intentions to destroy Wellington and capture Brussels have failed. However, the ultimate goal of Wellington and Blucher to cooperate and destroy Napoleon has not succeeded. The battle has ended in a standoff between the opponents. The next day will depend on what fateful decisions the army commanders decide upon in the next late-night hours. The history of the world will be changed by the final pre-dawn army orders they will issue. Just before midnight, Wellington meets Blucher at the village of Ohain, northeast of the battlefield. Though both are grateful to have accomplished the unification of their armies, their war conference is filled with tensions, doubts, and emphasis on the big strategic picture of their cooperative options. At the same time, the French commanders have been summoned by Napoleon, for their staff meeting, at the imperial headquarters, at the La Caillou farm. There, Napoleon can hear Marshal Grouchy in battle, in the distance, far away at the town of Wavre. Wellington's losses are crushing. The Prince of Orange is dead, and General Picton is severely wounded. Picton's two elite brigades are all but destroyed, as is that of Generals Omptedar and Lambert, both of Somerset's British heavy cavalry brigades, and General Bylandt's Dutch Belgian brigade. The British Foot Guards division has suffered heavy losses, and so has much of the British artillery, and two Hanoverian brigades. The relatively unscathed formations include General Adams' British Light Infantry Brigade, the Brunswick Corps, Vivian and Van Leur's cavalry brigades, and the infantry of Chassey's Dutch-Belgian division, and Hugh Halkett's Hanoverian brigade. Wellington's army has suffered 18,000 losses in casualties and missing, out of his original total of 68,000 troops. The Duke has to decide how best to use his detachment of 17,000 troops, which he had stationed 8 miles away, at the town of Halle. Blucher's losses of 6,000, out of the arriving 50,000 troops of his 3 Prussian corps, that engaged in the battle, have been heaviest, in General Bulow's 4th Corps. Nevertheless, 25,000 more Prussian troops are due to arrive by the next morning. Blucher has yet to hear from his 3rd Corps commander, General Baron von Thielmann, who is still defending the bridges at across the River Dyle, 9 miles away, against the French attack of Marshal Grouchy. Napoleon's army of 72,000 soldiers has lost 22,000 in casualties and prisoners. Hardest hit are his 2nd and 6th Infantry Corps, and his 2 heavy cavalry corps. He has lost 6 generals, including his severely wounded brother, Jerome. Although his army is in no shape to attack, it is deployed across the highest ground of the battlefield, and still garrisons the La Haye Saint farmhouse. More importantly, his Imperial Guard is largely intact, and he has over 200 cannons still operational. During the French staff conference at Le Caillou Farm, Napoleon must carefully decide upon the best strategic options for using Marshal Grouchy's 33,000 troops, and then determine what his own army must do for the next day. Will the devastating Battle of Waterloo now become a 2-day event?